I'm a big fan of Harriet the Spy. You can see my review somewhere or the other. The story of 11-year-old Harriet M. Welsh, the little girl who goes around spying on everyone. She has her notebooks and she obsessively writes down what's happening with everyone, observing them, given the kind of advice by her nanny, old Golly, that you need to know everything about people. And a part of that is because there are so many different ways to live in this life that you shouldn't just kind of blindly follow what your parents do, but you should find out your own way. And the best way to do that is to gather as much information as possible. So as a big Harriet the Spy fan, I was really interested when Steve Donahue mentioned that a biography of her was coming out. And ordered that and got that beamed into the house as soon as it was released. And that is Sometimes You Have to Lie, The Life and Times of Louise Fitzhugh, Renegade Author of Harriet the Spy by Leslie Brody. This traces Fitzhugh's life all the way from 1928 Memphis all the way to her early death at the age of 46 in Connecticut in 1974. So yes, that's obviously why I came to the book, and even in the subtitle, this is the author of Harriet the Spy. This is sort of why I think you would be interested in that. It definitely is. It's a book that, right from its subtitle, saying it's the renegade author, it's trying to really kind of come up with a different view of Louise Fitzhugh, who, for I think a lot of her thing, it was sort of pushed just popularly that, oh, she's like, a funny spinster lady, not that she was a lesbian who had very kind of deeply kind of heartfelt political and social views, was a troublemaker in the best sort of way of being a troublemaker, and used those powers to actually kind of throw lifelines to kids, probably most notably to sort of non-conforming females, especially young girls, especially when Harriet the Spy was actually first published in the 60s. It's the first wave of what was to become a thing of kind of realist fiction in talking about actual issues for kids. Harriet is a young girl who talks back to her parents, who is kind of oppositional, who goes to his child psychologist at one point, is prickly, is difficult, and is as probably as prickly and difficult as her creator, Louise Fitzhugh, is. She's someone who grew up in the Jim Crow South and was extremely eager to just kind of get out and leave that behind, finding, the racism and sexism of the time and the homophobia of the time really oppressive, ending up in Greenwich Village in New York, where she was an illustrator, painter, and eventually an author of books. This is it's a rich, interesting, kind of fraught life. Louise Fitzhugh was someone who seemed to be very kind of hard to get along with in some ways. She cycled through like a fair number of relationships. She definitely seemed to take the role of an artist who was looking for partners who were going to kind of take care of all the kind of the mundane stuff so that she could focus on her art. And was very much that kind of a personality of thing, and kind of cycled through various partners, various women who fulfilled that role for her. So it's a shame in this book that as I was reading, it's like, we get a lot of descriptions of Louise Fitzhugh's art. Her illustrations, you kind of be well aware of. She illustrated Harriet the Spy, for example, so that is very well known. But I was like, her painting, I don't know anything about her painting. And I was like, as I was going through the book, it's like, this book doesn't have those paintings in it. It's like, or if they do, it's like, well, in the background, you can't really see it. And it's like, what is that? Well, that's probably where we get into the thing of the the reason for this book, that you can see why this was seen as such a kind of a vital book by the author, Leslie Brody, is that you don't get the sense that this was particularly done with the cooperation of the Fitzhugh estate, which was, at least as far as Leslie Brody puts forward, was much more interested in framing Louise Fitzhugh as strictly a children's author, and leaving kind of references to her sexuality out of it. And I mean, I guess if you're going forward from the 60s and 70s, especially deeply homophobic times, even in the 80s, the idea of like a lesbian would be writing a children's book just didn't, well, that wasn't in my head as a 11 or 12-year-old, but I wonder, rather conservative gatekeepers also would have problems with that. So be as what as may, this book does not seem to have been done with the cooperation of the Fitzhugh estate. Indeed, at the end, when she's when Leslie Brody is talking about the Fitzhugh estate, she quotes Harriet the spy, saying that, in the end, that some people are one way and some people are another way, and that's that. So they seem to have kind of chosen to kind of be separate on the things, and the Fitzhugh estate has not shared Fitzhugh's papers with biographers, or has been very stingy with. There's a lot of kind of control. There's the control issues there, I guess, as the estate has been putting through. There is definitely a thing of, you get the sense of there's a divide, because Fitzhugh was in New York for a lot of her development, and then has her very last, with her last partner, Lois Moorhead, moves more into the countryside, and kind of develops a different life, and that kind of left behind a lot of those New York people. And Leslie Brody seems to be much more on the side of kind of the New York Greenwich Village people than she is with Lois and that kind. Lois herself has died, actually, in I think 2008 or something like that, but the Fitzhugh estate still seems to kind of lean that way. Now, for like the meat of this this biography, though it is very readable. I found it very readable. It's one of these ones that, like, sometimes I find biographies are very, okay, we have to kind of get through the chuff. This thing starts off with a bang, with the divorce of Fitzhugh's parents, very public, nasty thing, where there's the transcripts of the trial that got to that stage, and people were coming to actually watch the trial, where her mother was pushed out of her life. Her father gained sole custody, and definitely you get to see a lot of kind of issues that she had with her family, with her father in particular, in this period. So you get a lot there. Louise Fitzhugh herself didn't like to write a lot of letters, so a lot of it is coming from remembrances of people around her and friends, but you still get an idea of exactly how kind of prickly and how kind of hot-tempered she could be, that she was a pain to edit. Even though, boy, there's a chapter on the creation of Harriet the Spy, and you see how the editors that she worked with, especially Ursula Nordstrom, a very kind of storied editor who had worked with a lot of, like, Maurice Sendak, E.B. White, was like, how crucial those editors were in the creation of Harriet the Spy. That if you know the story of Harriet the Spy, one of the key characters is Old Golly, and in the initial draft that she brought to them, Old Golly wasn't in there, which it's like, wow, that's like a foundational kind of chink in there, and they actually kind of tease that out of a rather recalcitrant, kind of pouting, kind of scowling, like, what are you going to tell me? Because that's kind of her attitude towards all adults, kind of like, what are you going to tell me, kind of thing. Was able to kind of shepherd. It was amazing just how they worked together to shepherd this. Louise, not taking away from Louise Fitzhugh, she is definitely the the kind of the genius, the one who kind of came up with this character who has lived down all these years. But it's just a wonderful chapter of these editor working with this writer. And it, with the success of Harriet the Spy, she becomes even more difficult to work with in a way. And it's a real shame that she died so young that you don't get to sort of see what's going to happen next. She is one of these writers that you think, oh God, if she was on social media today, though, she'd be one of these people who would be like making an asshat of themselves, yelling at reviewers about negative reviews of her books versus letting them kind of stand on their own. There is a thing at the end where it's like she gets a negative review for the last book published in her lifetime. Nobody's family is going to change. Story of a black family where the Sheridans, where Emma, age 11, wants a lawyer and stuff like that, but she's got a father who is a lawyer who's just like, oh, that's ridiculous. Women can't be lawyers, kind of that. So sounds like a really interesting book. It got a negative review. And there is an implication with how Brody writes it that's like, well, that gave her that caused the chain of event that gave her the brain aneurysm that killed her. Which is like, it's like, yeah, so a bad review killed Louise Fitzhugh. It's much more complicated than that. She had her own health issues, probably wasn't, but it's just like, sort of like she is one of these people who took things very personally. I mean, just editors kind of questioning her about her characters or trying to prod her into kind of getting better stuff. She would react to really poorly. She shelved Sport, one of the sequels to Harriet the Spy, because someone dared to kind of ask questions about it or say like, oh, maybe that doesn't work. It's like, pfft, she shoved it aside and didn't come back to it. It was published posthumously. So yeah, it's a really interesting book. I like books where, especially biographies, where it's like, okay, this isn't just like, oh, we're doing this because we're doing this. We're doing this because there's a reason. I want to, Leslie Brody wants to tell a story about how this isn't just some kind of like, oh, it's a children's author. Oh, isn't she a nice, funny lady? It's like, no, this is somebody who is a serious artist who had some serious points to make, was prickly and troublesome and hot-tempered and kind of a hot mess, but was just also really vital and somebody who should be read today. And it was interesting just reading her. I stopped before I got to the point. I was reading this biography and I stopped before she started talking about Harriet the Spy, in particular, like interpretations or kind of context, because I wanted to read it myself and kind of go back to this book that I hadn't read for, since I was like 11 or 12, but still had in my head as like one of my favorite books. And I really loved it. But going back to her, she was really good. Leslie Brody was really good at putting the book into context of the times of this kind of thing, of the reaction to the book. The book got banned because at that point it was like, oh, this is encouraging juvenile delinquent behavior. This Harriet talks back to her parents. This Harriet doesn't really conform to kind of like the social norms of what a good little girl should be at that point, which is like, this is the renegade part. I mean, I'm sure someone reads it today and thinks, oh, Harriet's like kind of a cool kid, but you wouldn't think, oh my God, she's pushing at the norms, but she totally was. So it's good to get that kind of a context too to the novel. So yeah, that is my review of Sometimes You Have to Lie, and I'll picture up here of Sometimes You Have to Lie. That Sometimes You Have to Lie is a quote from Harriet the Spy, from advice given to her by Old Golly. It's like, sometimes you have to lie, and you can see that in the context of sometimes you have to kind of give the social lie, the things of you lie to be kind, to be cruel and mean to other people. But you can also see it in the context of being being a kid who is not the right norm, who is perhaps, gay in a time when the medical profession said this was a mental illness. It's like, sometimes you have to lie to survive. And so was a really kind of a crucial lifeline to a lot of kids out there. I'm not gay, but that Harriet the Spy was definitely a lifeline to me at the time when I read it, in a what felt like a deeply conformist conservative sameness. It was a thing of like, yeah, sometimes you can be different. You can be the outsider looking in and trying to figure out what your own way is, was really important to me. So this is a really important book, I think, for at least for me. And, you know, if it chimes with you, I hope you'll check it out. More videos later.